Today I'll be showing you my second and final entry for the 2021 Puzzle Advent Calendar. I'm sure that by now you already know what the calendar is, but if you're new to it, it's a massive yearly collaboration by the puzzle making community to make 24 daily videos about brand new puzzle designs. Subscribe to Matt Studio so you don't miss tomorrow's video, and check out the playlist linked in the description to check out all of the other puzzles that have been shown so far. So anyway, this is the double Square-1. It looks like two Square-1s connected together, but what actually is it? I'll tell you shortly, but take a second and see if you can figure it out. To give a very big hint, it's an extension mod, and the base puzzle is the same as all of these other cubes. That's right, it's actually a 3D printed extension mod of a regular 3x3 cube. However, it does have extra layers on the top and bottom, making it truly a shape mod of a 3x3x5. So let's jump back in time and take a look at how the double Square-1 was made. Of course, for 3x3 extension mods, I like to use the Moyu 30mm 3x3. I don't usually sand its faces down, as I haven't really experienced the need to do that in the past. Normally when gluing extensions onto the mini 3x3, I first do all the corners, then the edges, and then finally the centers. However, the cuts on the outer layers on the double Square-1 line up in a way that would make it nearly impossible to position the outer centers after all of the edges are on the cube. Due to this, I had to glue on the parts in a different order, with the centers not being last this time. What I did is I put on one corner, and then the two edges next to it, and then the two corners next to those, and then I believe I put the centers in, which allowed for edges that were already in place to kind of serve as a stopping point for the center. After which I glued on the rest of the edges and the final corner. When designing the double Square-1, I actually made two completely different sketches for the vertical turns and horizontal turns, which is unlike what I've done for basically all of my previous 3x3 extension mods. What this basically means is that vertical turns and horizontal turns are going to be incompatible, so you can't make a 90-degree vertical turn and then a horizontal turn. The result is kind of similar to a 3x3x4 type puzzle, or just any even layered 3x3 cuboid, where you have to make a double turn on the vertical axis. I think it's interesting to have basically a non-shapeshifting 3x3x5, as its central layer will essentially be solved as a floppy cube, as opposed to a regular shapeshifting 3x3x5, where the first step of the solve is kind of just a 3x3 solve, to solve just the inner 3x3 cube of the cuboid. After the outer extension layers were fully adhered to the cube, I started putting in the extra layer parts. The extra layers on the double Square-1 are towards the inside of the cube, as opposed to being on the outside like on my Waterfall Cube series and the Pandora Square-1. The reason for this is that the extensions for the outer parts already looked really funky in the sketches and the revolves, and I found it easier to add these extra layers kind of as forming a ring on the outside rather than having to finagle it into the already pretty ugly inner mechanism. The inner layer parts turned out a bit more rattly than I'd like them to be, and to be honest, I'm not totally sure of why, other than the obvious reason of slightly off clearances. What I do know is that it made it kind of a pain to assemble these inner layers, but eventually I got them done. Finally, the last step in assembling the double Square-1 was to glue on the central layer extensions. I did the edges before the centers, as in this case there was more room to shift the edge extensions around to fit the centers in afterwards. Alright, and the double square one is now stickered. So after I left off, I designed a sticker set, which if you actually look closely here, you'll see that the sticker doesn't exactly match this piece. It looks like there's sometimes inconsistent gaps, but that's just because I wanted all of these stickers to look exactly the same. So that means this one, this one, this one, and this one are all the same, as are these four. Because I think that when you look at this from a distance, that's what really completes the illusion of just this being two square ones on top of each other. Something that was, I think, less successful is this here. All of these stickers are perfectly rectangular, with the corners being squares. But you can still see the fact that the puzzle's cuts are a little bit curved. But I'm not too worried about that. I think overall the cube still looks pretty good. So now I'm going to take it outside and we'll see how it works. So, how did the double square one turn out? Aesthetically, I think it looks pretty good with the sticker scheme, and the colors I chose are nice as well. I went with 10 colors to make it more interesting, rather than the regular 6 color scheme. In terms of turning, the vertical turns are pretty good, honestly the best turning part of the cube, which makes sense given that it's just extensions of the inner 3x3. In the other direction, it isn't too difficult to turn both outer layers together, as again that's basically just the inner 3x3 mechanism doing the work. Turning the inner triangle layers is surprisingly decent as well, although they can be a bit difficult to grip due to their shape. By far the worst turn is just the outer layers on their own. They don't really feel like they actually want to go alone, and you have to hold the inner triangle fairly strongly for the outer layer to turn properly. I find this a bit odd, but I guess it's just how the friction turned out inside the cube. You can see that the inner layer has a significant gap between stickers, which is meant to improve the illusion of the cube being two square ones. When I posted a photo of this in Discord, someone suggested that this could have been an opportunity for a 3x3x6 with a cut in between the two square ones. In theory they're right, but in practice this would have been a lot more complicated to design, and it was on somewhat of a tight budget for time, as I only conceptualized this cube after releasing my Waterfall Cube Supreme video. Additionally, if I were to cut the puzzle in half like that, it'll just be a fully functional 3x3x6, and I already have one of those. In this state though, it's a non-shapeshifting 3x3x5, which is not something I've solved previously, so I consider it to be more interesting for me personally. If you make a 90-degree vertical turn and then try making a horizontal turn, simply nothing happens, the puzzle blocks itself. This goes back to the fact that I used different sketches to generate the different types of cuts on this puzzle. Anyway, let's finish the checkerboard pattern. And here is the full checkerboard pattern. I think it looks pretty good, with the unique colors giving it quite an interesting look. I'm sure there's a bunch of other nice looking patterns you could do on this cube, especially given that you have 10 colors to work with instead of the normal 6. It'll be interesting to see how the extra colors affect the solve. I think the 6 color version would have actually been a bit more difficult, given that some pieces would look identical, thus creating an opportunity for parity. With the 10 color version though, each piece is unique, which removes the possibility of parity, but could make the solve more confusing in other ways. We will see. For now though, let's scramble the double square one. there we have it, the double square one is scrambled. Let's go upstairs and see how it is to solve. The first step I took in solving the double square one was to solve the innermost layer. This was essentially a floppy cube solve, but the fact that each part had two completely different colors on it definitely threw me off quite a bit. That became a general theme for this puzzle solve, with me messing up algorithms and their setup moves due to seeing colors that I wasn't expecting. I got the central layers solved pretty quickly, but afterwards I was genuinely struggling to solve the others, due to the 10 color scheme along with very high winds. I eventually decided to take the puzzle inside and finish solving it there, where I could concentrate on it and not the wind chill. Alright, we are back at the desk, so let's see where I left off. I'd finished solving the entire middle layer, which is these parts here, and I was getting thrown off a bit while trying to solve these inner layer parts. So that's what I'm just trying to do now, just finish up these inner layer parts. Let's take a look. Alright, so these inner layer parts are done now. This is flipped, but that's normal on the cuboid type puzzle, and hopefully some algorithm that we use to solve this top inner layer will flip this back. Actually, what am I saying? This doesn't actually have stickered centers, so I could literally just do this. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting quirk about that, I guess. The fact that these tiny internal centers are unstickered, so I can freely swap them around with no consequences. I'm still going to have to worry about the central layer on this when I'm solving the outer layers, though. Alright, so as we can see, the inner 3 layers are now solved. It is kind of trippy to consider the fact that these parts are on a single layer, but each part has 4 stickers. But I'm glad that we got these layers done, and now these will be slightly more involved because of these stickered edges. And also, I have to first figure out which of these is the red side and which is the orange, because of the 2 completely different color schemes that are present on this puzzle. So, let's see, this side has light green, the red side has dark green, so that means that this top layer is supposed to be orange. So, orange it is. Alright, now I just have these 3 corners left to position on this layer. Alright, so We now just have to swap these two edges around, and this algorithm requires an odd amount of R moves, which is good because this is flipped, so that means if I position the edges like this and I swap them, the algorithm will also flip around the inner 3 layers, which is what I want. And here we are, the double Square-1 has been solved. It really wasn't that difficult, and what I do appreciate from a solving perspective is that it wasn't just a 3x3x5, because a regular 3x3x5 would be able to shapeshift, and that means I would first essentially have to solve the inner or outer 3 layers as a 3x3 cube. However, because this doesn't shapeshift, I first had to solve this inner layer as the equivalent of a 1x3x3 floppy cube, which I think is just interesting for variety. And something else that tripped me up way more than I was expecting is these two completely separate color schemes. Like, just the fact that I'm used to one face having one color tripped me up a lot during and after algorithms, when I thought pieces weren't where they should be, or at least where I was expecting them to be, because the colors were different. I'm actually overall pretty happy with the colors I chose for this. None of them really look that special, and I do think it's a bit weird to have light blue next to cyan, but I think it looks nice, and it turned out well in the pictures I took of the cube earlier as well. I'm probably not going to solve this that much. It doesn't turn immensely well. Like, if I want to turn just the outer layer, I have to pretty aggressively hold this inner layer in. And turning these two together is a lot better, and it's also pretty easy to turn just the inner layer, but this isn't a speed cube tier of turning quality. But then again, I didn't make this to be a speed cube. I made this to be kind of an illusion, something nice and interesting to look at, something that makes you stop and think, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. And I think this puzzle achieves those goals pretty decently. But anyway, thank you all very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Matt's Studio so you don't miss tomorrow's Advent Calendar video. And I'll see you all next time.